Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. As we finish up this week of looking at Bible stories of forgiveness, we're going to explore another of my favorite stories in the Bible, and one you probably know well too. It's the story of the paralytic that they let down through the roof in order to see Jesus. It's a familiar story. Jesus was preaching and teaching, and so many people had gathered around that when some folks brought a paralytic to Jesus in the hopes that Jesus would heal him, they couldn't get anywhere near Jesus. But they didn't give up so easily. Instead, they made a hole in the thatch roof and lowered the man down to Jesus' feet. What a sight that must have been as Jesus and the crowd looked up at what they were doing, and this man was being lowered down. I can't help but picture Jesus smiling at it all. And suddenly there they all are. The guys looking down through the hole in the roof, the paralytic lying there, Jesus standing over him, and the crowds all staring to see what would happen next. Now we all tend to rush ahead at this point in the story to where Jesus tells the paralytic, "Stand, take up your mat, and go home." And the man does. But if we don't rush through this story, we'll see something pretty remarkable that happens first. With the paralytic lying there, the first thing Jesus says to him is, Son, your sins are forgiven." When Jesus says that, a big controversy ensues. The scribes who were sitting around started questioning whether or not Jesus had the authority to forgive sins. And the story wraps up by Jesus saying that he could, and just to show them that he could, he would do something harder and heal the man so he could walk. And he does. But what's interesting is that the point of the story is not really the healing, but the forgiveness. Now, it's true that in those days, people thought that illnesses were outward manifestations of inward evils. So they would all have thought that the man was paralyzed by the evil within him. His own sinfulness had resulted in his paralysis. Of course, in today's world, we know better. Or do we? Seems to me there are many times when we are paralyzed by sin and guilt in our lives. When we can't let go of the past and embrace the bright future God has for us. When our relationships are broken in pride and self-centeredness and stay that way, that's another kind of paralysis that keeps us from reconciliation and peace. And who's to say how our guilt and worry and fear affect us physically? In other words, what Jesus knows is that while we need healing, our most basic need is forgiveness. Perhaps the biggest miracle of this story is that the forgiveness freed the man from whatever past had him immobilized. And as a result of the freeing grace he received, he got up and walked. The forgiveness led to the healing. The forgiveness led to wholeness. The same thing happens for us. When we are forgiven, we are made new. We are remade whole. God reaches into our lives with love, down to our most basic need, and gives us forgiveness, urging us to let go of those chains that bind us, of the paralysis that keeps us immobile in our beds of guilt. Your sins are forgiven. Your sins are forgiven. Your sins are forgiven. Rise, take up your mat, and walk. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.